A church in Carrollton, Texas recently performed some special wedding ceremonies for cohabitating couples. Our Heather Sells spoke with the pastor of the church about how it all started with a sermon.
A church in Carrollton, Texas recently performed some special wedding ceremonies for cohabitating couples. Here to tell us more is Pastor Pete Briscoe with Bent Tree Bible Fellowship. Pastor, thanks a lot for joining us.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Heather.
Tell us about these ceremonies that you performed. What was the motivation?
Yeah, so we did, last Saturday, we did 7 weddings, one after the other, starting at 10 in the morning and going till about 5 in the afternoon. And the motivation was really, I did a sermon on cohabitation and talked about the fact that it was a cheap imitation of the real thing, that God really has 2 great ways to live life in Christ. One is as a single person, one is a married person, but if we're cohabitating, we're missing the benefits of both of those things, and we're settling for something less than what God has for us. And so I wanted to preach this message, and then at the end of it, I didn't want to just say, okay, now go and fix it. I wanted to give people an opportunity to fix it. And so at the end of the service, we just said, hey, here's an offer you can't refuse. If it's time for you to get married, we'll give you a free wedding on Saturday. Come on down.
Wow. How did the couples respond in terms of that? I take it the couples who you just married were ones who came forward after that sermon.
Yes, they were. And the responses were just amazing. There were couples all over the map, age-wise. We had very young couples. We had some couples that were in their 60s, some that have been together for years, some that had 2 or 3 children already, others that had been together just a very short time. But their response was universally grateful. I mean, they were just so happy to be able to do this. Most of them had been having conversations about getting married before the sermon, but when they heard the sermon, they sensed the Spirit saying it's time. And so it was really a special day. We had a ton of fun, and they were all just really grateful.
Tell us about the original motivation behind the sermon. I'm sensing that perhaps you've struggled wondering how to best reach people in your congregation and perhaps outside your congregation who are living together.
Yeah, I mean, the motivation for the sermon, I was doing a series, it was a 4-week series called Awkward, and we talked about 4 topics that are hard to talk about, but we really do need to talk about them. And so cohabitation was one of those topics. And the idea was that a lot of people in our culture, maybe they found Christ a little later in life, and no one ever told them the way that it's supposed to work, the way that it works beautifully when God's in the middle of it. And so I was working on the assumption that we had a number of people in our church that were living together that really didn't know any different, or maybe just hadn't taken the time to obey the Lord in this. And we really wanted to give them an opportunity to be challenged by the Spirit in that and to step into something much better than what they were experiencing. And that's exactly what happened.
That's really wonderful. Going forward, do you think you'll do this again? Have you heard from any other churches that might want to replicate what you've done?
I don't know if we've heard from any churches. I did an interview earlier in the week on Moody Radio and encouraged churches to call our church and ask for Melissa, our wedding coordinator, if they'd like to look at doing something like this. And I haven't had a chance to talk to her, but we'd love to help any churches that would like to do something like this. What we've discovered is a lot of these younger couples, especially, they're in a place financially where they can't afford a wedding, and that's one of the reasons why they don't get married. And so offering a free wedding really can help couples take this step. So we really strongly encourage churches to give it a try.
All right, Pastor Briscoe, that's a very uplifting message. Thanks for your time.
You bet. Thank you, Heather.